Hi there, hope you're having a pleasant day wherever you may be. I gotta watch what I say. I'm near the Delicate Arch. Delicate Arch is a part of Arches National Park, which is just outside the town of Moab in southeastern Utah. Now, to talk about Delicate Arch, we first have to dive into the geology of Arches National Park itself. Arches is a very unique place because Delicate Arch is one of 2,000 arches that are here in the park. So why are there so many arches in this area? Well, the geology here is sort of complicated in the sense there's a lot of steps, so I'm going to try to break it down as simply as I can. Millions of years ago, there was a sea that formed and dried up to 29 times, and every time it did that, it left layers of salt until eventually 5,000 feet it accumulated. Nearby mountains later eroded and covered up that salt with rock, which put a lot of pressure onto that salt, causing it to sort of move. Eventually, the salt couldn't hit a barrier where it couldn't go anymore, and it began to bulge. As it bulged, the layer of rock just above it began to crack. Almost like, think of it like a piece of cantaloupe or something, where if you kind of pushed it up, the cantaloupe's going to crack. Sort of like that. Eventually, the rock above it eroded away, and water seeped through the cracks, eventually dissolving the salt. The rock was not supported anymore. It collapsed and created what's known as Salt Valley here. Now, along the edge of the valley were left these long fins, which were the remnants of the cracking, and that provided pretty good conditions for the formation of arches. Arches form as a result of a couple of processes. One of them is the rainwater mixes with carbon dioxide in the air to become slightly acidic acid rain, which eats away at the bonding sort of cement of the sandstone until eventually it eats enough away to break through. Another one is ice. Water will seep into weaknesses, cracks in the rock, which will expand and contract and expand over time, and eventually that breaks the rock down until that eventually punches through. In either case, once the hole is created, there's stresses that are put on the rocks above, where eventually they give way and break off, enlarging the hole, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger until eventually the top of the arch is too weak and it collapses. Now, arches, by their very nature, have a lifespan. Eventually, every single arch will collapse. Not unlike natural bridges, which, if you're interested, I visited natural bridges in my Four Corners video if you'd like to check that out. But what do you say we get back to this? Since there's 2,000 arches here, they come in all different shapes and sizes, and there's lots of trails to go to various ones. But of course, we're here to talk about the Delicate Arch. Now, it goes without saying that the Delicate Arch is pretty iconic. In fact, Utah has more or less adopted it as its like state mascot. It uses it on the license plate. You see it all over the place. As for Delicate Arch itself, it is the byproduct of those aforementioned processes of weathering. In cowboy days, they called it variations of bloomers or chaps and things like that, because take a look, kind of looks like that. Now, if your goal is just to see the arch, then going to the viewpoints is perfectly fine. Granted, you're very far from the arch, so hopefully you have binoculars or a telephoto lens. There's an upper and a lower, and to be honest, the difference is negligible. The one difference is there's like a ridge in front of you from the lower that's kind of blocking, not the arch itself, but being able to see like the sheer cliff face that it's next to. Other than that, the view is pretty much the same. It's going to be pretty small in all your pictures, so just keep that in mind. If you want to see Delicate Arch, go to the viewpoints. If you want to experience it, hike to it. As far as hiking to Delicate Arch, this is a popular national park, and this is a popular trail in said national park. So don't expect to be alone up there. It's approximately 3 miles or so round trip, and it's considered moderate to strenuous. And I would probably put it on the higher end of moderate because I'm out of shape, I was tired, but it wasn't that horrible. When you first start the trail, there's a little ranch house that you can take a look at. It's kind of small. I believe it's from the 1800s. And then there's also a little offshoot for some petroglyphs. Now, we all know I'm a sucker for some good petroglyphs. This one is believed to be from the 1600s to about 1850 by the local Ute tribe. This is considered very important because this is direct ancestors to the current Utes, as opposed to ancestral, which is a little more murky. It does feature some bighorn sheep as well as people riding a horse. So horses were introduced to the tribe around the 1600s. Very interesting stuff. And this is just part of the trail. After checking those out, that's when you start to hit the reason why it's moderate to strenuous. You end up climbing up a big, somewhat steep sandstone rock face. It is kind of challenging, and since it is sandstone, you really don't see a marked trail. However, there are a couple signs throughout to kind of lead the way. All told, I think it took me a little over 2 hours to make the hike up, and then spend a little time there just hanging out. Probably a nice spot to just grab some lunch. However, it was very windy when I got up there. I don't know if that's normal, but it was windy. It's funny, when I first walked up, I was pretty terrified. You walk up right about over there. After a little bit of getting comfortable, I walked right up. Just a few minutes. And then while you're up there, just sit there and admire the view, admire the beauty, admire the eons of weathering and erosion that it took to create that, and admire that someday it won't be here. Admire the fact that we're getting this little snapshot of geologic time where, had we shown up a few million years prior, none of this would have been exposed. Had we shown up a few million years later, it'll all be weathered away. So we're getting a really cool glimpse of what geology is capable of. Now, there are plenty of other features and hikes to admire in Arches National Park, so by no means is this an exhaustive list of things to do or places to see here at Arches. I chose just to talk about Delicate Arch. Well, that does for this one. Thanks for joining me on this trip to the Delicate Arch in Arches National Park, and I guess I'll see you on the next one. Don't mind me, I'm just looking for the rest of the troop. Everyone's lost but me.